So a really warm welcome to Hannah Barrett. She's this incredible yoga teacher. She's a mom. She has got this booming yoga business, and I'm lucky enough to call her my friend. So Hannah, welcome to Love at First Science.
Thank you so much for having me, Sally. I'm just excited to talk to you as always.
Oh, babe, listen, can you just give the listeners a little brief introduction about yourself so they know who you are and where all your amazing knowledge comes from?
Yes, so Hannah Barrett, based in London, and I wasn't always a yoga teacher. I used to be an actuary for 10 years. So I used to work in maths and like finance, basically. And then I fell pregnant and I just realized that I wasn't kind of fulfilling my purpose and changed what I wanted to do and trained to be a yoga teacher, and then had another baby. And I am really interested in anatomy, which is why I kind of was drawn to your classes, Sal, and all your teachings and wonderful, all the knowledge you share. And I just love understanding the body. And what started with me was just helping postnatal mums. So people that are having a baby understand their body, how to get strong again. And it kind of went from there, and just in general, just helping people to understand their bodies a bit more and to use yoga, not only for body, but for mind as well, because it really does seep into the whole of your life, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I know that you have very successfully launched Strength Through Yoga, which was a book which I think has helped so many people already. But you also now are launching a book about yoga philosophy.
Yeah, so it's a mixture of everything. It's called Yoga Happy. I don't know if I've told you the name of it, but it's launching at the beginning of next year, and I'm really excited about it because one of the things, I don't know if you find this as well, but yoga can seem very inaccessible. Like not only just the postures and like people like looking at it thinking, God, no, I can't touch my toes, I'm never going to be able to do that. But the words, sometimes when you hear all like bandhas and drishti and things like that, like it feels like a bit like, oh, that's an exclusive club and I don't know what that means, so I can't join that. So I wanted to kind of simplify things. I wanted to show people what tools yoga can give you to keep you calm, keep you strong, because life is chaotic, right? But also to like strip it down to say like, these are the 8 limbs of yoga. What do they actually mean? How can you bring the yamas and niyamas into modern day life? So yeah, it's got movement, it's got breath, it's got meditation, it's got journaling, it's got all kinds of things, but it's the things that I do to keep me happy.
Yeah, and I know how much pressure you're under. Not only are you a mum of 2 very small kids, but you run, like I said, a very successful business. And to be honest, as someone who looks at you from the outside, I often am met with the thought, how does she do it all? And she's always so smiley. And what was so beautiful about looking at your content is you're very open about the fact that you make mistakes. And sometimes you tell your kids, look, I'm really sorry I yelled at you. That wasn't your fault. That was me having to deal with my stuff, and I took it out on you. And honestly, like that level of honesty and transparency, and you're an incredible leader, basically. I look to you as a leader. And I don't know where this question is going other than me just fangirling at you.
I love you.
I guess
no,
the
it's so
question
true
is, how
though.
do you do it all?
Oh, do you know, it's funny because I think I look at you and think the same thing. I think we often don't realize how much we do. And I say to people like, pause, stop, look at all the things you've done. And I look at other people thinking exactly the same thing. But I'm also super organized. And I used to be a proper perfectionist. I don't know if you used to suffer from perfectionism. So for me, I'm like, I don't want my kids to be like that. So when I screw up, because I often, I can often shout and lose my temper, I'm like, actually, do you know what, guys? It's okay. This is why mummy's actually really tired because I didn't sleep, or whatever the reason was, whatever the trigger. So they can know that it's not them, but also that it's okay, that because kids have like big emotions and they often lose them, and to know that they're not alone in that is big, isn't it? So
Huge.
yeah.
And I think that that's the reason why I wanted to bring this up on the podcast, was especially because of the book that you're coming out with. I mean, this is you kind of living those truths in action. And I know we're going to talk about science in a second, but I just wanted to kind of touch upon this because I feel like, yes, science is this amazing thing and we should look to it to help guide us. But I think underpinning all of that should be really how we're living our lives day to day. And when I watch you, I'm like, wow, she actually really does walk her talk, which I think is so beautiful to observe.
See, it's funny. I do really try to, and I notice when I'm not. So when my meditation drops off or my journaling, and I will suddenly realize that I haven't done it for a week or whatever it is, even just a few days, and I'm like, oh, I'm not feeling right. And then I'm like, oh, all these things that I tell people to do, because, you know, we can fall into this habit, can't we, of yoga teachers, especially if we teach a lot of preaching and not listening to our own advice. And that is the worst thing. We've got to follow our own advice. Otherwise, you know, otherwise, what's the point?
Otherwise, what's the point? Totally. And it's very inauthentic. And I think that actually people are super smart and they sense that. So I think actually coming from a place of, you know, this is me, I'm messing up, but look at me trying, you know, I think that's actually a really, really good place to come from. But Hannah, I did want to like take a quick sharp turn now into the world of science, because you and I share very similar views on the core. And this whole series actually that we're about to launch into is about the core. I'm doing the podcast based on different themes. We've just wrapped up breath. We're now in core. And this is a topic I'm extremely passionate about, because I believe that the way we've been doing things needs to change. And I wanted to kind of get in lots of different experts. And I know because you and Finola have released Strength Through Yoga and you're working with a lot of prenatal people, pre and postnatal people. Yeah. Can you just give us a brief introduction on where you've come from, where you're going, what your kind of middle journey has been with the core?
Yeah, so I think, so yeah, let's use the pre and postnatal population as an example, because when I completely agree with you, when we're saying people are in, you know, you don't want this rigid body. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to always be holding in your core, because you're just going to be, your pressure system isn't working. Your pelvic floor takes the brunt of it. It doesn't make sense. However, when you have pre and postnatal women, let's just use postnatal because it's easier as an example, they forget, the body forgets this anticipatory nature. So the core basically works as it should. And the example you gave in the recent workshop you did was so great with the bicep, because the bicep's such a good one because people really can visualize it. Like, why would you walk around holding your biceps at 30%? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, try moving like that within like 2 minutes, you'd be like, what am I doing? This is ridiculous. So you don't want to do that with your core. Your core needs to work with you, and it needs to work in a team. And you've got your deep abdominals, so your pelvic floor, your diaphragm, your transverse, and your multifidus all working together as a team. So you don't want to be ruining that connection they have with each other. However, when you're postnatal, the brain mapping can go. So you need to, instead of jumping back into, let's say, planks, you know, let's not have a long conversation because I know how you feel about planks, but instead of jumping straight back into that, why would you do that? You need to then reteach your body those pathways, that neural pathways. Okay, where is my pelvic floor? Yes, okay, I can feel where my pelvic floor is. Then let's start making everything work as a team. Obviously, you're always using your breath because your breath is so important and everything is working with your breath. And then you bring in arm and limb movements. So for postnatal people, I would cue the core, but just to get them working it properly again. And then you don't need to be cueing it because it's going to be working properly. And when you're doing a new movement, say that you might need a little bit more body awareness, just as you would do with other muscles in your body, then you might need to think about it a bit more. But once your body knows what it's doing, it's okay, because you've got that mapping and then you don't need to think about it. Totally. I don't know if I just answered your question.
You totally answered it. I think what was quite nice about what you said, and it's maybe something, a missing piece of the puzzle that I could have had more clear in my messaging, is that when you've gone through some kind of trauma around, let's be honest, giving birth to babies is fairly traumatic for a woman. Any kind of trauma around your abdominal area, you are going to have to reintroduce conscious awareness into that place. You are going to have to reconnect to it. And I actually interviewed Nidhi Sharma recently, who, I don't know if you follow her, she's absolutely amazing. Her handle is Think Beyond Pain. And she actually said, as soon as you've given birth, within a few hours, you need to consciously be getting back in touch with that part of your body, utilizing the breath, utilizing the pressure system, of course, but consciously getting back in there, using your hands, feeling the area, visualizing it contracting along with the breath. And I think that is a massive missing part of the messaging when I did my core workshop. Actually, I know you alluded to it earlier, that I maybe could have been a little bit more clear on that, because what's so beautiful about the information you and Finola are putting out is that when you have gone through that trauma, you do need to spend that time laying the foundation again.
But you did actually cover it. I don't think you massively missed it. It maybe wasn't as big as a point of that, but you didn't. And you're so right about getting back into it quickly, because for most people, even if you've had a C-section, as long as you've passed urine, you can get that connection with your pelvic floor going again. And just being, as you say, like really aware of your body and the different parts of it, because it can be a bit taboo, can't it? Because it's not like you can from the outside, like it's not like we can do a pelvic floor exercise now and see it working. It has to be kind of, yeah, it's it shouldn't be taboo. We need to get it untaboo. And you've seen the nice guidelines this week changing about making younger women aware. I wonder what you feel about that and whether you feel like that could cause issues. I just saw an article about it and I was a little bit worried about their explanation of how to do it. And I was like, oh, I don't know if it needs more explanation, but I didn't know if it was just whoever wrote the article.
My love, I haven't seen it. Can you fill us in on what it said?
Okay, so it's basically just saying that girls, I think it's from 12, are going to be taught pelvic floor exercises now in a school setting. But when you're thinking about your pelvic floor, it's not just a squeeze. You don't squeeze that area. It's kind of lifting and it's back to front. You want to think about it as the whole area. So like you're stopping yourself from passing wind and water. But just as important as it is to have it strong, you have to be able to release it. And this is one thing that you said you suffered with, that you were always lifting it, and releasing it is a big point. And actually we have a whole section in our book about this, because lots of people do get this overactive pelvic floor as well, because they're always lifting it, and your body's not going to work for you.
No, absolutely. So, I mean, yeah, what was quite cool about covering Julie Weeb's content, and if anyone is listening and you want to do deep dive into all things core, looking up Julie Weeb is definitely worth your time. She actually speaks about how women should be targeted from adolescence, but not necessarily just on focusing on one team member, i.e. the pelvic floor, but actually looking at the system as a whole. Because what's happening with girls as they start developing breasts is we either cover it because we're horrified, or we flaunt our stuff. And what we're doing is then developing around that shift in the rib cage. And actually, what's so interesting about looking at posture as a mechanism to get better core engagement is that if we are developing an unusual system with our rib cage, that affects the diaphragm. And the diaphragm is actually what's leading the charge in terms of core engagement. So I really wish the NICE guidelines, instead of just focusing on the pelvic floor as an isolated team member, looked at the whole system.
Yeah. And I don't know if it does, because I haven't read the whole thing, but I suspect it doesn't, because they probably just want to keep it really simple. But it's so right. It's not, you can't just look at it as one thing, can you? Absolutely, completely agree.
And also, if we're looking at these young adolescent girls, and if they are being told in their gym classes to grip their core, and then at the same time being told to lift their pelvic floor, what's really going to suffer is their breathing. And that's probably going to have then a knock-on effect on anxiety levels, their gut working properly. So yeah, it's a multifactorial issue. I mean, you've got a little girl, so I guess you're kind of already thinking, in the future, this is something that you're going to have to educate her on as well, how her little body has to work.
It's so interesting though, watching the kids breathe and how beautiful children breathe, because they haven't got any of this thing yet with their, they've got their lovely straight spines and they're not trying to suck their bellies in, and they just breathe like we're all meant to breathe. So I use it as a reminder, okay, release the belly, because I still do it sometimes. And I'm like, oh, okay, make a point to just pause. This is why we all need pauses in our day. Don't need to just stop and breathe and actually pay attention.
Yeah, I love that. Is that something you put in your book, the pausing? Because I think that's really 100%. Profound.
Yeah,
I like that a lot.
So easy, isn't it? Just started wearing my Apple Watch again, and it has the breathe reminder, doesn't it? It's always okay, take a deep breath.
Take a moment, take it all in. And I think that actually that power of pausing actually gives you a chance to smell the roses and enjoy your life. It's those small pauses that actually remind you it's happening now.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things you mentioned in your core workshop that was really interesting that I didn't realize is how many people are holding their breath and doing things and holding their breath.
Athletes, high level athletes.
Yeah, crazy.
It's crazy. And they're actually doing very simple things and actually holding as a response to this core gripping. And what's so cool is that actually we should be using some holding breath to lift heavy. But then people are translating that into lifting a pencil off the floor. It's just not task specific.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so tell me, my love, if there was key takeaways from your strength through yoga that you found as being really revolutionary for the women that you've worked with, what kind of key takeaways would you share with the community?
And I'd share this as well from my experience of having babies, is that especially if you come from like where I came from, where I was very used to exercise, I was very fit, I was very strong, I was strong throughout my pregnancy, and you have the baby and you're like, I want to go, I want to move again, don't have a baby anymore, so I want to move my body. And my key takeaway is pause. It's like a theme.
We've come full circle.
But pause, because after I had my first, I just jumped back into the wrong kind of thing. It was actually a postnatal class, but with kettlebells, and I was 6 weeks postpartum, and I worsened my diastasis, and I injured my shoulder, and it was just too much. And actually what I needed to do was what I now teach, and it's like, start with the fundamentals, get that connection again with your pelvic floor, start bringing the other deep core muscles in, then move your arms and legs. Because going back to this idea of the bicep, if you haven't used your bicep in 9 months properly, because your muscles are lengthened and they're not going to work optimally like they would, then you would never go and pick up a 20 kg dumbbell and start doing bicep curls. It would be ridiculous. But yet, because of when we work the core, we tend to not do muscles. It's not like someone attaches a weight to your pelvic floor, right? That visualization was horrendous, but anyway, you don't think of it the same way. But actually, if you're going to start doing a plank and a one-legged chaturanga or whatever it is, it's like going in at that 20 kg and your body can't cope. So rail it back, do those fundamental exercises, get that strength, get those pathways building, and then you are just, in the long run, you're just going to have so much, but you're not going to have issues with prolapse, with incontinence. And it's really sad that people still think, this idea of a mum time or incontinence or prolapse is normal, is like a new normal of having a baby. Oh, I've heard one doctor say to a friend of mine, you've had a baby, what did you expect? Of course it's going to be a car crash down there. A GP said that.
Way.
Horrendous. So like the messaging isn't that. Like it's not that at all. Like you're not broken. You just need some tender loving care, and you will be as strong as you were before. I'm without a doubt stronger than I was before having babies now.
I watch your practice and I literally have my eyes jumping out of my skull because woman, you've had 2 kids, and no ways, I cannot do what you can do. When you put your feet on the wall and you're in plank, and I'm like, oh, I tried that and I'm like shaking like a little leaf. You're amazing, Hannah.
But anyway, so basically my point is slow down, like go back to the fundamentals and get your body to just function as it should do. And don't forget the breath, because I know you've done a whole series on the breath, but the breath is key. Your diaphragm is part of your deep core and it's all working together. So get it working together how it should.
Yeah, totally. And what would you say some of the myths are? I know you touched upon rigid core, but are there any other myths out there that you think you hear all the time and you just think, oh, come on, guys, like we've gone past this in the research?
Yeah, it's a really, we've got the common one for yoga, which is Mula Bandha should be lifted for the whole of a yoga practice, but it doesn't work. The mechanics don't work. As you said, you don't walk around with your bicep. So you don't just need your pelvic floor to be strong, you need your pelvic floor to be able to release as well. And you need to get your body's pressure system working as it should.
Can you talk more about the pressure system? Because I think that is such an important part of the conversation that's sort of been missed. When we talk about core, we don't often mention the pressure system. I'm so glad you just brought that up.
Yeah, because in your workshop you were talking about it in plank as well, and we can talk about it a bit in plank, and I hope I get the right wording, and Finola might listen to this and then kill me. But so there's something in our body called intra-abdominal pressure, and Celeste used a really good example, I think you got it from Julie Weeb, about thinking about your abdominal cavity, that's the right word, isn't it? Which is basically, so you've got your diaphragm in the middle here, and everything below, that's your abdominal cavity. So when you breathe in, your diaphragm lowers, but this abdominal cavity, you can't compress it. It's like a balloon or a water balloon. So if you hold your core rigid and your diaphragm's going down, then what's going to happen? The pressure has to go somewhere. So it's going to have to go into your pelvic floor. So that's really useful to understand why we shouldn't be holding rigidly on the inhale, why we need some lengthening. So going into something like plank, you're like, well, should I not be holding my core? But the thing is, if your body is strong enough and ready to be in that position, then your core is going to automatically turn on, as your other muscles do. And what happens when you inhale is this pressure system will mean that you will have some expansion of the belly, but your muscles are still working, but it's eccentric contraction. That's the right word,
Exactly.
isn't it?
Yeah, eccentric loading through that muscle. Exactly.
So you are going to have that space because you need that space. You're not gripping in that position. And if you watch any of my videos when I'm in plank, you will see my belly move. I'm not holding rigid. I'm not bringing the air just into my ribs, because that's not how our body should work.
Yeah.
Did I answer the question?
Yeah,
Our ribs should
beautifully
move as well.
Yeah, our ribs should move, of course. No, and I know that that's what you meant, but it's not an isolated thing that you can only, basically the diaphragm is a massive muscle. So it's going to create massive change, not only in the ribs, but also now the abdominal cavity. I'm so glad we sing the same tune on this, because like with many kind of new emerging sciences, I suppose, as this information comes out, there is a lot of resistance around it, because we've been taught to do things a simple way for so long. And then suddenly, if we change the narrative, it's very difficult, to suddenly go back and go, guys, we have to go back to the drawing board. It can be difficult for teachers.
Yeah, but sometimes, like, I think some people overthink it, and it might not actually be different to what they've been teaching. It's just said in a different way that makes sense. And actually, it's maybe this idea that you have to hold rigid in certain things, maybe like plank pose, giving example, then it's changed. But the other thing to note about the diaphragm as well, that, and I know you said this in your workshop too, but there are, if your diaphragm's not moving properly, there are so many things that attach to your diaphragm or go through, like, aren't they? You've got your like psoas and your QL, am I right in those ones? That there are
so many systems, everything from your psychological system to your gut actually relies
the
on the
vagus nerve as well.
Vagus nerve, your heart rate variability. I'm pointing to the correct side. Just pointing at my chest, and I'm like, is that where the heart is? Yeah. This is your anatomy teacher talking. But yeah, the heart rate variability relies on the diaphragm, so it hits so many different systems.
Which is why everyone's like, go back to the breath, and it's so true. And as you like just saying what you said before, just everyone think that if you are a chest breather, it really can affect your anxiety levels. So, practice diaphragmatic breathing or just expansion through the belly, and even just doing 3 breaths like that, you will feel the difference in your body and the calm it brings. So simple, but so effective.
So true. And Hannah, is that ever anything that either you have experienced or maybe people that you've worked with like having to deal with anxiety?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, the issues I had. So when I had my second baby, it was a very traumatic birth. She nearly died. It was a very, very bad time in my life. And I suffered from traumatic stress and postnatal depression. And you live in this kind of like not breathing properly state. You don't realize it because you're not paying enough attention to yourself or your body, and it's a very difficult time. But when you do pay attention, you just realize how shallow your breath is, and it's just all here. There's no movement whatsoever. And lots of people I teach suffer with anxiety, and you learn how to breathe properly and be mindful in your movements, and just bring that mindfulness into everyday life as well, and it can make a big difference. It's important to say though that yoga isn't a cure-all, a quick fix, magic pill for everyone. It might not work, and it might be that if you're really suffering, go and see a health professional. I had therapy alongside, which I don't, that I'm honest about. We all need different things, like we're all different. And you say this as well, like one thing that might work for me and my body might not work for you, and vice versa. You can't just say this is black and white and this is right. We have to be bigger in our approach.
Yeah, and also I think the thing that we were talking about before we started recording is that not only should we be bigger in our approach according to context with each individual, but also we need to remember that there's this incredible body of knowledge that's constantly evolving, and we should evolve alongside it.
Yeah, everything's changing. We know so much more, which is, I don't know if we want to get onto this topic, but which is why I actually like Ashtanga terrifies me, that people do that with their bodies 6 days a week. And I'm like, they need to maybe mix it up. I don't know if you want to get onto this, but
yeah, I know I have been kind of burned at the stake, as it were, sometimes for
were
saying
you?
these
Oh,
things.
wow.
Well, I mean, I understand, because people have turned to a practice like Ashtanga, and it's served them incredibly well during very difficult times. It's helped them on multiple levels of their being. And if someone's saying, then hang on, we need to be careful because potentially that is what's disrupting the ligaments in your knee, and maybe that's why you're suffering with that, it can sometimes feel like a personal attack. I absolutely think do what works for you, but I do think we need to have a balanced approach in how we look at the body. And unfortunately, sorry, just to quickly, with something like Ashtanga and using your bandhas, for example, I mean, to grip your bandhas for an entire session every single day of the week, I think people don't realize the knock-on effect that's happening in their bodies.
So do you want to hear a story? Actually, I'm going to say one thing first. I actually don't think an Ashtanga practice is bad, but if I did it in my body 6 days a week, my body would break. Like, it's just
mine too. I used to do that, and that's why I had to stop, because I was so broken. Wow. Yeah, I loved Ashtanga. It was my first love.
Was it? Oh, I didn't know that. No, but I read a book when I was pregnant, and it was a pregnancy book for Ashtanga yogis, and it was great. And I can't remember what it was called, sorry, but it had like modifications and talking into it. But the point I actually stopped reading it was when it talked about the birth stories, and I really wanted to immerse myself in positive birth stories, and they were trying to be positive. But every single one of the stories I read in this book was about people who went into labor, couldn't labor their babies, and end up having horrific experiences and emergency C-sections because they didn't have that release of the pelvic floor. They only knew how to hold it. Whereas when you have a baby, it's very important to release. Yeah. And actually nearing birth, it's quite important to do your pelvic floor exercises the wrong way round. I don't know, you might disagree with me, and feel free to disagree with me, but because you give birth on an exhale.
I didn't realize. Please tell me more. I had no idea about this.
So when I did my pregnancy teacher training, I was taught that for the whole of your pregnancy, you lift on the inhale and you release on the exhale. I've changed my view, because I don't think that's just going to muck up the mechanics in your body if you do that for 9 months, and you're going to end up doing the wrong thing. So, and I spoke to a good friend of mine, Chloe, about this as well, and she dived into it, and she's a physiotherapist too, actually. So she said, this is what I do, and now this is what I do as well. But 3 weeks before your due date, then you switch it up. So the whole time you're doing it on the exhale because you're working with your diaphragm, but then 3 weeks before your due date, you're teaching your body to let go on the exhale, because you give birth on your exhale. You want to be able to release and let go, and it's really important to learn that. Yeah,
that's amazing. That's so enlightening. And I think that again goes back to the original thing of always, we have to be so context dependent as movement practitioners. We cannot just say that there's one thing that's going to work for everybody. And that's so enlightening, because it's something that I would never have thought of. I haven't had kids. I haven't been through that experience. You've had 2 kids. I mean, you've gone through it twice. Yeah. So listening to your experiences on that is incredibly valuable, Hannah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, it's fun, but it is funny because I got taught it one way, and then I kind of learned a bit more, and I was like, this doesn't make sense. And then you just adapt. And it's you always say this, ask questions. You are taught by different people, but question what you're taught as well, and say, actually, does that make sense? And if you don't think it does, then maybe go and do your research elsewhere. And don't just learn everything from one person, get a whole load of views. Yeah.
And what's so nice, I think, I've been getting messages from people going, I'm with this one person, and I have to say, being with this one person has done my body good because of X, Y, and Z. But this and this, when you said it was different, really helped me a lot with dealing with my sciatic nerve pain or my headaches. And I think the important thing to remember is that we are all flawed. My content, guys, I hate to admit it, my content is as flawed.
But we're human. Stop yourself, because you research so much. We're human, and life is always moving, and we can't take in everything.
And that's the thing, like, if someone's content's working for you, great, but it doesn't mean that absolutely everything they say is going to work for you. It's important to cherry pick and listen to your body. as my friend Adele always says, stay curious. And I think that that's the best advice.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good. Hannah, I know that you are a busy lady and that you have 2 young kids and you've got a lot going on in your life, but I wanted to ask, could you perhaps just wrap up this interview with sharing something that if you had to give a message out into the world, if it could be just one message from based on all of your knowledge, all of your experience, as a mum, as a business owner, as a pre-actuary, what kind of message could you give? Your one little billboard statement to the world. Is there anything that you feel could help?
Pause, keeping the theme, but pause and ask yourself, why am I doing this? What is the purpose of me doing this? And what do I want to achieve? So I love the way you just took a deep breath when I said that, but like literally pause and take a deep breath, because like life is hectic. It's chaotic. And sometimes we go on this path and we get on this path and we're like, okay, we're on this path now. But no, you don't have to be. Life is forever changing, and remember that. And think, what is my purpose? And if you don't know what that is, just take a moment to like have a think and have a breather and think, what do I want to do? And what am I doing now that's serving me, but what is not serving me? Because time is so precious and we're all so busy, and that's kind of a failing of humankind, isn't it? We need to be less doing and more being. We don't be enough. We don't stop and smell the roses. And yeah.
Oh, totally, my love. It's something I'm really having to work on myself. I'm such a doer, and I always feel like my worth is tied to the level of output. And it's been a real steep learning curve for me through the years to actually learn how to just slow down and take stock and actually say no to opportunities. You know, I'm constantly being asked, when are you going to have a child? And I'm like, maybe I won't do that because I feel like it's adding more in, you know? Yeah. So I think, yeah, just kind of having that ability to say no to opportunity is hard for some of us A-types, but actually so important. And I love that you gave that advice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also we all need to stop comparing ourselves to that person on social media or whatever who looks like they have it all sorted, because we all have things going on. And, you know, comparison is the thief of joy. Is that the right thing?
I think that's what they say. Yeah.
Yeah. Just think of all the things to be content with in your life. And again, as I said, like, look at what actually you're doing. And you'll realize that you're probably doing so much more than you thought. Even just surviving this whole coronavirus crisis, like, it's a massive achievement, right?
Yeah, I have to say, I'm very, you know, it's so weird. And I keep saying this when people ask me, you know, how do you feel about the whole pandemic? I would never, ever wish for it on this planet or to happen to anyone. I wish that it never happened, of course. But I'm very grateful that I went through the experience, and it's absolutely made me a better person. You know, like the level of gratitude, the level of, just a small example, the water here in Portugal. I'm just in Portugal at the moment, and the ocean is freezing, guys. I mean, it is balmy. What do they call it? Baltic, not balmy, Baltic. Wrong word. But I used to always sit on the beach and never go in. And one of the things I missed so much through the pandemic was just jumping into the ocean. And every single time I'm near the ocean now, I go straight in without any hesitation. And I always feel better for it.
Oh, so, yeah.
And it's because of the pandemic that I'm now a little bit more taking life by the balls, as they say.
Oh, that's so nice. I love that. So nice.
How do you feel that it affected you, Hannah? Did you take any lessons from the whole experience?
It was the lesson of slowing down, because I had 2 children when it first kicked off. I just had it myself. We had it at the same time, didn't we? And it knocked us for 6. And then I was like trying to release the app. All these things I had to do. And I just thought, I've got 2 children at home and I'm homeschooling. I've got no help here. I have to slow down. And as you say, then you're like, all of these things coming in, what is important to me and what do I have to say no to? Because, you know, you can't be working all hours of the day. You can't. It's not going to give you any. They always say, don't you? You never want to, when you get to your deathbed, you never think, oh, I wish I worked more. And it's so true. Let's remember that fact.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you so much for giving up your precious time to talk to me and to share your wisdom with all of us. We're very grateful to have you on the podcast, my love. And I really look forward to interviewing you again in the future.
Oh, thanks so much, Sally. Thanks for having me. You're awesome.
Awesome.